Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Point Podcast. Everybody's doing well. Made it to a Friday, heading into a weekend with lots to get into. We got Stanley Cup Final. We have the NBA season coming to an end last night. Canadian Football League, which I haven't gotten able to get into yet. We're back. Watched a lot of that game last night before the NBA got going. Interesting end to the game. Some interesting storylines there. We also got the U.S. Open we're going to talk about today. And this weekend, I plan to podcast tomorrow morning. So be on the lookout for a release tomorrow morning. I like to talk golf, and when it's on a major, get on a Saturday. Also, we can preview game 2, the Stanley Cup Final. Start looking ahead to the NBA draft, different storylines today. There's always baseball to talk about. So I plan to podcast tomorrow morning. That's the plan. Be about early, but 8:30, 9 o'clock tomorrow morning is my plan to do that. And we should have lots to chat about. So that's what I plan to do tomorrow morning. So that's just a little programming note to start the show. Before we get into the topics of the day, before we get into the Stanley Cup Final Game 1, which I didn't get to get into yesterday, but we will today, and we'll talk about, obviously, the NBA wrapping up last night. I always talk about, I talk about gambling on the show, and I get into a little bit about what I think would be a good pick of the day. I do sometimes reveal bets that I make, and I've started gambling more and more frequently over the last couple of months. And, everybody likes to talk about their winnings, right? Like, I hit this one for a good payout, and you always talk about that. Well, sometimes you have to take your lumps, and, hey, this is my show, and I like being forefront with my audience. So we're going to talk about the bad beats, the bad gambles that I've made over the last week, because I've been on a bit of a cold streak here. Let's start with the Celtics. I put money on the Celtics at the end of the first round to win the NBA title. Put $100, would have paid over $500. It's close to $600. If I would have cashed out when they got to the final, I would have made almost $300. So a nice little check, nice little payday, up some money. But I decided not to just pay out because you're chasing it. You want to make some more money. And then the Celtics did what they did in this series. They defied me. They defied logic. And they lost last night, losing in Game 6 in just demoralizing fashion, where we'll get to Jason Tatum and if you can call that a game last night. But that's a loss for me. A gambling bad beat. Frustrating. Second one this week. I put $1, just $1, just for fun, on Phil Mickelson to make the cut. It's more of a fun, bet. It was over early yesterday. I think he's at plus 12 now over 13 or 14 holes. He's not making the cut. There's another $1 down there. There's $101 that was in my bank account, no longer there. So that's a struggle. Then I did win last weekend on Rory McIlroy. I put money on him to win the tournament, which he did. So there's a win for yours truly. Then I bet on the Avalanche to win spread. Well, they did not. Tampa brought that game to overtime. Should never have gone to overtime. I knew Colorado was going to win game 1. They did. But I did not expect it to go into overtime. I did not expect Tampa to play as poorly as they did and still get that close to winning. So there was a loss, $20 down the drain. So it hasn't been a great week. After the McIlroy win, this weekend I got McIlroy winning. Threw some money on him. I have a 3-way parlay bet, which if you're not familiar with what a parlay is, it's when you throw 2-3 guys and you basically, you could say, well, this guy's going to win. You're going to get a goal scorer. You're going to get this Vasilevsky will have 30-plus saves. My parlay this week is that my 3 picks and my golf pool, which is Rory McIlroy, Xander Schauffele, and John Rahm will all make the cut. We'll wait to see on that one. We'll talk about that tomorrow if they do. But that is my parlay bet of the day, or of the week, just to get to tonight. is Schauffele, Rom, and McElroy to make the cut. I believe they will, but after last night's Celtics loss, where they cost me lots of money, I'm starting to question it. Is that going to hit? Is Schauffele just going to spray it all over the place today? I have to have faith, but I feel it's important to say my winnings and my losses when it comes to gambling, because I've just gotten into the world last 3-4 months. It's been a good, profitable thing for me. It's a good side hustle, if you will. I really never gambled before. I tried to help some friends, although that was not that fun, because when you lose the bet, then your friends blame you and they would have made a worse bet. So go figure there. But also, I've learned this. Seamus Fillmore, who you all know, if you listen to the podcast, comes on every Tuesday. I love him to death. Dear friend. But if this is just a gambling 101, if Seamus Fillmore is rooting for a team, don't bet on them, because they are the ultimate cooler. Celtics, Leafs, they're just bad bets to make. Don't bet on any. Just text Seamus. If you know Seamus, just text him and say, do you like this team? If he does, just avoid it. His teams don't get you victories. They don't get you money. They make you lose money is what happens. I put money on the Leafs winning Game 6 against Tampa. What happened then? Nothing. They lost. I did put Tampa money on Game 7, but nevertheless, not as much winning as the Game 6 loss, I'll tell you that. So I wanted to go through the betting angle here. And also, that's one way to make money, is just to not bet on Seamus's teams. Avoid them like the plague, because they will haunt you forever. They'll cost you money. They might cost you a family. If you're putting a large amount of money on these teams, you could just be gone. I'm being dramatic, but that is one simple way to not lose money. Make money, bet against them. That's just how I look at this. It's not all Seamus's fault, but it's some of Seamus's fault, because I had faith in his teams and they screwed me. They screwed me royally out of my pocketbook. Now, money's not everything in this world. I get that. I'm not like a live golfer. I don't need to. It's not all about the change. It's not all, Shane McMahon. Here comes the money. But I mean, I don't work for free. I like to make some. I like to make you guys some money. That's why I do the pick of the day segment. That's why we talk about gambling. And I'm trying to help you today on a Friday. You want to make a bet on a Friday night, go into that weekend with a smile. Well, I know Seamus likes the Los Angeles Dodgers. They're a pretty good baseball team. But he's not really a fan, because he jumped on them on a bandwagon when they started winning. So take that with a grain of salt. But I know he likes them. And the last two teams have been coolers. They got the Cleveland Guardians tonight. You know what we're going to do here? We're betting on the Guardians. On the road, the Guardians with Zach Plesac pitching tonight against Clayton Kershaw. It screams Dodgers win. But just because of what's happened, we will not bet on the Dodgers. We will not give him vindication. And I realize he's a sad chum today. His Celtics lost a title. I wish I felt sorry for him. I don't. That's something I wish I had in my brain. Compassion, more of it. For fans, for different things. I try. Trying to work on that just as a human being. It's not a real successful so far. But we're betting Guardians tonight. It's pick of the day. It's early. We're only 10 minutes into the podcast. Still have a lot to get into. But Guardians tonight. On the road. Plesac. Maybe we'll go Plesac plus 6 innings. At least 6 innings pitched with a Guardians win by over 2 runs parlay. Just because. Kershaw gives over 2.5 runs. Maybe somebody's already made that bet. Don't know. Just a thought. It's a day of the cooler. And when the teams are just a cooler, you bet against them. And that's where we're going today. That's how we had to start this podcast, because I can't blame myself for having faith in the Celtics and them just letting me down. I have to blame somebody else. And I'll blame the fan of the team for getting that into my head, that team could win, could beat Steph Curry. And I was going to talk about hockey first, but no, we're going to go to basketball first because we're on the topic. Let's get into it. NBA Finals Game 6 last night in Boston. Boston, the former city of champions. Celtics, one of the best organizations in NBA history. And I couldn't tell last night, I'll tell you that, because in a must-win game, I don't know if I've seen a team be that lethargic. See a team have such a great start. Celtics started the game on a 14-2 run. Complete domination. And then they finished the first half with 39 points. 14 in the first 5.5 minutes. They finished the half with 39 points. Last night was just a horrible game from the whole team. I'll get to Jason Tatum in a second. And we're going to talk about the Warriors and their dynasty today, but I have to get the Celtics off my mind. Jaylen Brown started the game off hot, hitting jimmies, hitting jumpers, moving the ball well, making pretty smart decisions. But then he morphed back into his old self, turning the ball over, getting into the lane, and the Celtics had this problem that they can't make a layup. This team can't make layups. I wasn't good at basketball. Wish I was. Wasn't growing up. I could make a layup. This team goes to the hoop, and they're playing against the Golden State Warriors, where they're big, so to speak, and Kevon Looney is 6'8", 6'9", and they couldn't make a layup against him. Draymond Green, an undersized power forward, they couldn't get a layup on him. It was a lethargic half where what could go wrong did go wrong. They weren't defending. Golden State had made 48% of their threes in the first half. So Brown's playing terrible. Smart's doing whatever he does, flopping all over the court. That was a big problem last night, and that's something the NBA needs to address, is the problem with flopping. It makes the product less than. It makes the product unappealing because it makes your players look soft as cottonelle tissue. So Marcus Smart, another starter, he's flopping over the floor. Al Horford, he was the only guy who had a great game last night. Had 12 points in the third quarter, making his threes, played his heart out. He's 36 years old. He had nothing left in the tank. But credit to Al Horford. He's the one guy I'm going to say he had a good game last night. Other than that, they all stunk. He's playing well. Actually, Robert Williams played pretty well too, because he defended. At least he tried. He made an effort. He did foul out, but he blocked 5 shots. He was in the paint. He grabbed rebounds. Then we get to the Boston Celtic bench. 5 points. In the last 2 games, they had a combined 9. Derek White lost all confidence. I don't know what the hell he was doing last night. He played too much. Ime Udoka, he was in a tough spot last night because Tatum didn't want to play, although you had to play him, which was even worse because you don't have any other option. Because he wouldn't shoot the ball, and all he did when he did get the ball was give it to the Warriors. But Derek White stunk. Grant Williams had a series to forget, and little Peyton Pritchard couldn't hit a 3. 5 combined points. Jordan Poole, Gary Payton Jr. III, Kevon Looney, they had 21, they had 31 in game 5. Yeah, game 5. So that's over 50 points to 9. 50 to 9. I'm not a math major, but I know 50 is a lot more than 9. Celtics out-rebounded and they couldn't make a shot. It was just a lethargic night. Oh, Boston also. 22 turnovers last night. 22 turnovers. How is that possible? 22? I'd like to think. I see Creighton's in the chat. I like to think me, Creighton, a couple friends get together. We wouldn't have 22 turnovers. We just shoot the ball. Dribble up the floor and just shoot it. Then you can't turn it over. Hit the rim. That's a shot. It's a shot attempt. 22? Golden State had 11, which is a lot for them. They had 6 in game 5. 22 turnovers. After that 5-minute mark, the Celtics basically checked out of this game because the game was over in the second quarter. They made a run in the third quarter to cut it to 10. I never thought they were going to get close. I never worried about that game getting even remotely because at times it was a 25-point lead. It was all Golden State. And now let's get to Tatum. Tatum's young. He's 24. He's been in the league 5 years. And he is a very good player. I want to start off by saying that. He had a great postseason. And the Celtics, after the way they started the year, should be very proud that they got to the NBA Finals. I think if Chris Middleton's healthy in Milwaukee, they don't get there, but that's semantics. They had a great year. Positive one, something they can build on, for sure. No denying that. But this series, Jason Tatum, who was anointed basically as a superstar, put in the superstar club, given all the extravagant trappings of a superstar, lauded as one, was everything but a superstar in this series. He was there. He was never a guy that took the game over. He never was aggressive. He shot 23% in the paint in this series. That's what I'm saying. They can't make a frigging layup. Tatum was afraid to go into contact. He would change his body angle to not get into contact to draw a damn foul. But you have a bad series. It's your first finals. That happens. LeBron had a bad first finals when he played the Mavericks. Kobe Bryant didn't have a great first finals with the Lakers. Larry Bird didn't have a great first finals when it just comes to shooting the ball. But in your last game of the year, in your last half of the season, it's extremely hard to excuse this. Jason Tatum in the second half of last night's game had 2 points and 5 turnovers. The best player on a nearly championship team cannot have 2 points in the entire half. I don't know how that's possible. That Jason Tatum had only 2 points in the entire half. I don't want to hear about injury. I don't want to hear about his shoulder, which he grabbed 18,000 times. I don't want to hear about the referees. Were the referees great last night? No, but they were bad on both sides. This was not, the Celtics got their ass beat. Nothing to do with the officials. He didn't show up in that second half. And if I was a Celtics fan, I'd be extremely encouraged about the season. My biggest concern is Tatum actually a superstar? Because he played the second half last night in a defeatist mode. His mentor is Kobe Bryant. Kobe Bryant, I don't care if he'd be down 45 points, he'd come out the second half and attack. He might shoot the ball 80 times and only make 10 of them but he would be aggressive. He would at least try to win that game. Tatum did not do that. Tatum didn't put an effort that you could be proud of in last night's game. It was a pathetic effort. Thank God for Al Horford in the third quarter, because this game would have been embarrassing, the score. Golden State would have won by 35 to 40 points in a closeout game on the Celtics' home floor. It was already a blowout enough. They won by 13. It should have been more than that. The Celtics had a great year. And I can't reiterate this enough. They should be happy with the season they had after the way it started. They have a new coach in Ime Udoka, who clearly knows how to coach, who I think had his flaws last night in the game where he played Derek White too much. He played some of these guys way too often, the bench guys. And I get it, guys need a rest, but it's a must-win game. And it's tough to play Tatum with how bad he played last night. But my main concern still remains. You got to the finals, and you should be proud of that. You beat Kevin Durant. You beat Giannis Antetokounmpo to get here. But with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown being your best players, can you do it again? Jason Tatum's not a superstar. He hasn't proven that he is a superstar yet. Him and Jaylen Brown are closer than I believe people think they are. Their skill levels are very similar. They turn the ball over at the same rate. Jaylen Brown has a better shooting percentage. To me, they're close. They're both stars. They're not superstars. The superstar label is thrown around too often in every sport. The NBA, of course, it is as well. Can two guys that are star, not superstar players, get you to an NBA final? Win you a title, I have my doubts. When Dallas won, Dirk was a superstar. The Toronto Raptors had Kawhi Leonard. At that time, he was a superstar. He was a game changer to that roster. LeBron, of course. Stephen Curry, you bet. Kevin Durant. Tatum and Brown are very good players, but they're not superstars. And I haven't seen Tatum take that next step to becoming one either, because he was so tentative, he was so reserved, and he didn't attack in the biggest moments in this series. He didn't demand the ball. He didn't say, we're going through a struggle. Give me the ball. I'm going to go get us a bucket. Let's reset. Like the best players do. And maybe he'll find that. And he's got to be happy that he's got a good roster around him. But the Eastern Conference is not a cakewalk. Milwaukee is going to be back. The Heat are going to make a trade. I believe the Heat should do everything in their power to convince Bradley Beal, the Washington Wizards, to go to Miami. Trade off some assets. Bradley Beal will be great there with Jimmy Butler and their cast of characters. The Nets are going to be back. Who knows the hell what happens there, but they'll be back. Maybe they won't be any better, but they'll be back. Teams are getting better. And there's Philly with James Harden. And that's who Tatum reminded me of last night. Huge game, and he played like James Harden. Had nothing, brought nothing to the table. And for this year, we know this. Jason Tatum wears number 0. And it's fitting that he does, because he has 0 rings, and he played like a 0 last night. He had 2 points in the second half. Kind of would be better if he had 0, so it could just be a 0 all the way around. But he gave 0 effort last night. And with that, he gets 0 rings. Now, on the other side of the coin, start negative, then we'll go positive. The Golden State Warriors won their 4th title in 8 seasons. Steph Curry won his first Finals MVP. And as good as he was in Game 4, he may have been even better last night, in my opinion, because of the stage of the game. A closeout game on the road, and he goes 6 for 7 from downtown. Finished the game with 34 points. He had 8 assists. Steph Curry was just unbelievable last night. Golden State, as a team, were better than Boston in this series, and I didn't think they would be. I didn't think they would be because I liked the Celtics roster more going in. But with the leadership from Curry and the way he played throughout the series, which was pretty elite, they didn't have many pitfalls. Yes, they lost games, but they were calm about it. They could go through Draymond Green's struggle. They could go through a Klay Thompson struggle, and guys would step up. Jordan Poole over the last 2 games has been huge for the Golden State Warriors. Gary Payton coming back after missing the conference final was massive for them. He had 3 steals last night. He had 6 boards. He played really good defensively. And he threw in some points as well. He was big in his moments he was on the floor. I mentioned Poole. Draymond Green didn't have a great series. And he does a lot of talking. But he gets the last laugh today because, sure, he didn't have a great series. At times, he was unplayable for the Warriors. But he had a hell of a game last night. Nearly put up a triple-double. Had a great defensive game. Offensively, he made 2 3-pointers. He was all around the play, getting offensive rebounds, setting up great screens for Steph Curry. He was a difference maker last night. He really set the tone for them from the start. After going down 14-2, he made that first 3 to make it 14-5, and they went from there. They started chipping away, and before you know it, Golden State had just a stranglehold on this game. And he kind of said after Game 5 that they wanted to finish it on Boston's floor, to have that sort of vindication, to do it in front of their fans who are treating Golden State pretty crappy in this series. And he wore all black to the game because he said it was a funeral, which I love too. Yes, it's obnoxious. Yes, it's cocky. But when you win the game, it doesn't matter. It's vindication. You did it. And Klay Thompson only had 12 points last night. But it's also a great story for Klay, who hadn't played in over 2 years. One of the good guys in the sport. His father, Michael Thompson, a former Laker great. And he goes back from tearing his Achilles to tearing his ACL. And now he's back. And I expect him to be a better player next season than he was this year. But to go through it all, to come back late in the year, and to be able to battle through this whole playoffs physically, to get through it, to have some big games down the stretch for the Warriors, it's a big, big moment for him. But for me, it's the biggest moment for 2 guys in particular, and that's Steph and head coach Steve Kerr. For Steph, he's now 8 times All-NBA. He's an 12-time All-Star. I read this before the show. He's won 2 regular season MVPs, 4 titles. He's a 2-time scoring champion, and now he's a finals MVP, which he hadn't had on his resume. He's an all-time great player. And if he isn't in the top 10, we can go through it. You got Jordan, LeBron, Wilt, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant. You go through these names, I find it hard to leave Steph off of it because he's got 4 titles. He's done it all. He's revolutionized the game. And he's not just a guy we say, well, he changed the game. You know, Vince Carter changed the game in a way because he was so dynamic, the way he dunked, the way he presented himself. You'd never really seen it before. But then he was just another guy. He was a guy that was similar to Tracy McGrady, and his impact has been felt on Toronto forever. But Steph Curry has literally changed the game. Look at his teammate, Jordan Poole. Jordan Poole is basically the splash little bro, where he is the Steph Curry identical, where he has all the confidence in the world to shoot logo threes, and he shouldn't shoot as many as Steph Curry, but he does it anyway. He has that confidence. He has that swagger about him, and I think that comes down from having a teammate like Steph, who he's seen do it in games, do it in practice thousands of times. So having 4 titles, he's now equal to LeBron. He's one behind Kobe. He's one behind Tim Duncan. And these Warriors aren't necessarily going anywhere. They win this year, and they've had better teams. Obviously, in 2019, they had Durant. He tore his Achilles. They had Klay Thompson that year. He tore his ACL, and they lose to the Raptors. They would have won a title that year. And again, it's semantics. But Steph's 34. He's still playing at an elite level. Klay Thompson's 32. He's still playing well. So is Draymond. But you look, I mentioned Jordan Poole. They got to keep him on the roster. He's a great player. Andrew Wiggins, to me, is second in the Finals MVP voting. What a story for him. He's the 7th Canadian to ever win an NBA title. Truly impressive. Just what a step for him. To go from Minnesota to just everybody wanted him out of there, to changing his position. And what I loved about, he gets checked out at the end of the game so Iguodala can come on the floor. And I believe they put Iguodala on the floor because he's going to retire. He wins another title, and they wanted to get him out there because he's a veteran leader of the team. But you saw the embrace between Wiggins and Kerr, and to me that was really impactful because they hugged. And I think Wiggins, he needed a punch in the ass. He needed a tough coach. And Steve Kerr, I don't think is labeled as a tough coach. I think he has been. I think he's tough on guys. I think you have to earn the minutes on the Golden State Warriors. There's a reason they win every year and every second year. Steve Kerr deserves a ton of credit. And Wiggins, I think, was acknowledging that, saying, I bought into what you wanted me to do. I changed the way I played. I'm not the alpha. I'm not an egomaniac here. I'm just a team guy, and I'll show up when I need to. And it was a really cool embrace to see the two of them just be like, we did it. And for Kerr to say, hey, I told you what I was going to say worked. What I was telling you was for your benefit, also for mine, for the team. And Wiggins to say, I did what you told me to do. And guess what? Now we're champions again. But Wiggins now jumps into, Canadian lore by winning an NBA title, by being a big part of it, by locking up Jason Tatum in really good fashion for this whole series. He did a great job guarding him. But I love seeing that, to see that. And then Steve Kerr, as I mentioned. Steve Kerr won 5 titles in his playing career. Won many with the Bulls, made a shot to win a title, but he was a role player on that team. He was a good shooter, a good player in his day, for sure, but a role player at that, and he was never an alpha male on his team. But he won 5 titles, won a couple with the Spurs at the tail end of his career, had a really good playing career. But then he worked for, was he the ESPN? It might have been Turner. Worked for TNT for a while, calling games. He was good at that. Then he did some stuff with the NBA, and he's offered the job in Golden State. A first-time coach, and they built an empire there. 8 seasons as a coach, he's won 4 titles. An incredible run. And he wouldn't have gone into the Hall of Fame as a player, but he will now go into the Hall of Fame as a coach. But to have 9 titles, he's on the Belichick level. Phil Jackson, who he played under in briefly, obviously with the Bulls, he's got 11 as a coach. Won 6 in Chicago, won 5 in Los Angeles with Kobe and Shaq. Steve Kerr has 9. Obviously, it's different coaching, but if he can get 5 as a player, and if he can get to 11 like Phil Jackson, he's got, obviously, that's 2 more great seasons to win a title, but I wouldn't rule it out. He's already in the ranks as one of the great coaches in the history of the NBA. 4 championships. 4 championships. Greg Popovich has 5. If he could even, one of his coaching mentors in Pop, which would be crazy in and of itself. And he's doing this in an 8-year span. This Golden State team is not going anywhere. Curry's still there. They have their guys. Poole, Moody, if they can figure out Wiseman, who was a second overall pick who didn't play this whole year and they still won a title. They didn't trade him at the deadline for pieces, which is another incredible thing. Moody is there, looks like a good player. Jonathan Kuminga, I like the most out of all of them because I think he's so dynamic with his athleticism. And if he can figure out a shot, he's going to be a factor and be a difference maker in this league. This team could still be in title contention for the next 5 years because of what they've done drafting and developing players. Yes, you'll lose your Andre Iguodala's, and yes, you'll lose guys along the way. That's what happened with Golden State. They lost Barbosa. They lost Bogut. You lose guys to different teams. You lose them to retirement. But you keep the core and you keep building great players around them. What a season. I did not expect this when the season started to see the Golden State Warriors get here. Because just 2 years ago, they were in last place in the NBA. They had bottomed out. They didn't have any players playing. Steph Curry, Clay, you looked at him and said, is he ever going to be able to come back and be an effective player? He did. Steph Curry was banged up. He got through this whole season relatively healthy. And for him to cap off the season with a finals MVP, with another title, and he said this was the toughest one yet. This one definitely, I think, means the most to him because there was no Durant. He won 2 with Durant. Durant got the credit for those rings. Well, Durant's got 2 titles. Curry's got 4. LeBron James has 4. And I'll tell you this, Golden State's going to have a lot better odds to win the title next year when the odds come out on FanDuel. They might be out now. I'm sure they are to win a title than the Los Angeles Lakers. I'm sure LeBron would love to play with Steph Curry. I think there's probably something to the rumor that he would like to be on Golden State, to stay in California, but just to go to San Francisco, go down the road, play with the Splash Brothers. It's not going to happen, but I'm sure he'd like to because he knows he's not winning anything with the Lakers next year, and he's only getting older year by year. But to win 4 titles in 8 years, to have the success these guys have had, that these 3 guys had stayed together, they didn't go through any breakup, they didn't have to quit a team, they weren't James Harden, they didn't have to go Kevin Durant mode. These 3 guys stuck together, they're still great friends, and they're champions again. Truly incredible achievement. And again, they just have that winning gene. They came up big when they had to, and Boston just never did in the series. They had a 2-1 series lead, and they couldn't find a way to win Game 4. And after that game, it was check, please. It was over. They were getting out of the hotel. They didn't want to pay their bill. And before you know it, the law had caught up to them, and guess what? They're paying their fine or they're getting behind bars. So both these teams will get some rest, but the NBA draft, you can believe it, is next Thursday. So for Bob Myers, for the Golden State Warriors, and obviously tougher for the Celtics not winning, and then you have to get back to work. These teams got to make picks. This is how you stay a good team in the league. You draft a guy that could be a player on your team next year in all likelihood that you hope can have an impact. But a good season, a great playoffs for the NBA, all in all. I thought it was really entertaining basketball. I do think the NBA has to do something about flopping. It's too much. It's excessive. It's so clear, and yet the refs can't seem to figure out that it is flopping. So that's problematic. But other than that, I don't think the officiating were terrible in these playoffs. Golden State battled through. They did not get here because of officiating. Boston did not lose last night because of officiating bias. It was just a game where the better team won. But kudos to Golden State. 4 titles in 8 years. Steph Curry is now right on the precipice of one of the 10 best players to ever play in the league, and he's not done yet. So we'll see where this goes moving forward. Now to hockey, which you can believe it, the NBA is finished before the NHL, which never happens. It's always the other way around, which it should be. But again, we got the COVID stoppages and everything in between there, so that's why this is happening. But it's still strange to see NBA wrapping up a season, and the NHL could still be playing for another 2 weeks if this series goes as long as I think it will. But let's chat game one. Game one, Colorado beats Tampa 4-3 in overtime. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I did not expect this game to be close. I expected Colorado to win this game handily. Colorado wins game ones. They're 14-2 in the playoffs so far, which is incredible. But also Tampa doesn't play well in game ones. Tampa doesn't particularly care about game one. They'll lose it and come back and win the series. They did it against Toronto. They did it against the New York Rangers. And I thought Colorado would come out hot after that long layoff, and they just seemed to, I thought they'd have the advantage going into game one. And they did, in a sense. They were the much better team. They ultimately won the game. I just did not expect Tampa to take that game into overtime where it really wasn't that close. Start with this. I thought Mikko Rantanen and Valeri Nichushkin were the two best forwards for the Colorado Avalanche on Wednesday night. McKinnon played extremely well, but Rantanen was a force from the drop of the puck. He was possessed on pucks. He was physical, and he made great passes. I thought it was one of the best games he's played. And Rantanen is a great player in this league. He's right up there with some of the best wingers in the NHL. He just isn't talked about as much because he's not on a Canadian team. He plays in Colorado, a little bit parts unknown, and it's not a sexy team. You don't talk about Colorado until they're deep into the playoffs and they're on the verge of winning. But I thought he had a great game last night, 2 nights ago. Valeri Nichushkin scores a goal in the game. He was a force. To think about Valeri Nichushkin, who was drafted in the first round by the Dallas Stars. He was then there for a number of years. They didn't want to re-sign him, so he goes back to Mother Russia. They still had his rights. He plays a few years over there in the K, finds some success, comes back over to Dallas. Plays a number of years, had some decent success, but they let him walk. He's now in Colorado. He's a complete force. He's a power forward to the upteenth degree, and he meshes perfectly with McKinnon and with Landeskog on that top line because that line is physical, they're fast, and they're difficult to play against. But I thought those two guys were great. Another thing I like what Colorado did in game one was the way they approached the neutral zone. They had their D step up. They didn't allow Tampa to get a whole lot of momentum in the neutral zone. They stopped creativity from happening. And they also, on the opposite side, Tampa's defense and their forwards didn't do enough to stop Colorado from gaining momentum. Every time they got the puck in a neutral zone, could have been a turnover, could have just been a breakout through speed. It was too easy for Colorado to enter Tampa zone. It was just a one-way pass. It was like the express ticket, or when you're in the States and you're going through, you're paying the tolls there and you got an easy pass. That's basically what it was. You're going through the line, pass. We're not paying. Please avoid jail. Collect $200. Like just go. That's something Tampa needs to clean up because it was far too easy. Colorado just got the puck. They went in the zone. Didn't matter who it was. Could have been Makar. It was Nichushkin. It was the whole team had free reign. Coaching decision I love from the start of the game when I saw the lineup come out from Jared Bednar. He doesn't have Rantanen playing center, which this is incredibly important, and it's smart because in the conference final, Mikko Rantanen was playing center. He's a right winger. He is not a center iceman. And asking a winger to play center ice when he doesn't do it, sure, you'll do it if your team asks you, but when you're thinking logically, this is not a smart decision because it's not your natural position. You're going to do more to focus on the position and focus less on your game and being attentive to detail and just playing at an elite level. But you go with McKinnon line one, you bump Comfer up, Darren Helm played the third line, and Nico Sturm was inserted into the lineup to be the fourth line center. This was the way to do it. Rantanen played the wing. He had a great game. He had some good chemistry with Comfer. I like what Bednar did that. That was smart. I thought it was going to be a bad decision to go with Rantanen at center for the entire series. I'm glad he already took it off the table. I thought that was a great move, And that was early in the game, and he never put Rantanen at center. So I applaud him for that. Bednar had a better coaching in game one than Cooper did. Now, Colorado dominated this game. Many guys on their team didn't play bad. They had Eric Johnson had a bad play. He gets beat to the puck by big. My one thing there is Tampa's first goal. Big Nick Paul beat Eric Johnson to a puck. And I joke that Nick Paul teaches power skating in the offseason. But if Big Nick Paul is beating you to a puck, that's a problem. So Eric Johnson, you might have been tired. I get you're not the fleetest of foot anymore. But you did go number 1 overall in a draft. Nick Paul did not. And I like Nick Paul. But that he might want to burn that tape that a guy that skates as poorly as Nick Paul beat you to a loose puck, beat you to that spot. I would not want that on my resume. So, God have mercy on his soul. But that was a funny moment for me for Eric Johnson, who I do like. He is a good defenseman. I think he plays the neutral zone extremely well. But just be careful, because that was Nick Paul that beat you. In the next game, what if it's Anthony Cirelli? What if it's Hagel? You don't get a fucking chance. So, this game is dominated. Colorado, they got all the momentum. But the second period, 2 goals in 48 seconds by the Tampa Bay Lightning. And this is my worry about Colorado. Yes, they still win the game, but I mentioned game 1 is pretty irrelevant to me. I don't worry about it. It's not something that I say, well, now, Tampa's got to be concerned, because guess what? They couldn't win game 1, even though I don't view it that way yet. But 2 goals in 48 seconds does concern me. I'll be very clear about that. So in the second, McDonough gets a huge shot block, and the puck goes down the other way. And one of the filthiest moves by Nikita Kucherov, where he just makes a guy miss, give and go to Palat. Makar can't get to Palat on the back door. He pokes it home. 3-2. Deadly play. Palat, beautiful goal. And then Sergachev from the point. Yes, there's some guys in front, but it's not that difficult a shot. Gets through Kemper, 3-3. My thing here is 2 quick goals, sure. But also Darcy Kemper, I can't blame him for the Palat goal. Makar should have been there. He wasn't. But the Sergachev goal, I can. The Nick Paul goal, I mean, Nick Paul deked him out pretty easy. And we're talking about Nick Paul here. Darcy Kemper, you're not Jack Campbell. I mean, I get Nick Paul can score goals easy on Jack Campbell, but come on. Darcy Kemper played okay in game 1. And Vasilevsky didn't have a great game, which I didn't think he would. He never does in game 1. He plays the game. He plays great in the important games. Game 1's not an important game. Game 1 is so irrelevant to me. If you're a great team, game 1 is a warm-up. Game 1 is, what game 1 is? Game 1, if you're a band, is your warm-up. It's the morning before. It's you're rehearsing. That's game 1. It's a dress rehearsal. No dress rehearsal. This is my life. That's what game 1 is. It's the pre-show. You don't care about. You care about game 1 if you've never won, if you have no confidence. They're playing a better team than they have this playoffs. I get that, but looking back, I'll never admit, Tampa lost this because they lost game 1. They came out flat. No. They play like shit in game 2. I'll have more of a concern because they're playing Colorado. I will admit that. But the fact that this game went to overtime when it shouldn't even been close would concern me. Because Maroon nearly scored in overtime. He came out of the box after he got the delay of game penalty at the end of regulation. It goes back down the ice. Burakovsky gets an empty net. He puts it home. Great. But Colorado might have played their best game of the series. Makar played phenomenal. He played nearly 30 minutes, and overtime was only 1 minute and 33 seconds. So it wasn't a long time, just added time in the game. He was all over the ice. He was dynamic. He was skating everywhere. I love the way he played. McKinnon, like I said, I thought he played one of his best games of the playoffs on game one and the entirety of the playoffs. But as I look here, well, you played a great game. Vasilevsky didn't have his best game. I thought a couple goals early in the first period he should have had. Hedman didn't play great. Stamkos was pretty invisible after having a great conference final, but he wasn't great in the first couple games of that series. He got better as it wore on. So the game went as I expected it to. It just was closer than I expected it to be. So basing it off my logic, my knowledge, in the way I see this going, I would be more concerned if I'm Colorado because of how the game went. Vasilevsky played better as the game went on, no doubt about it. But also, you went to overtime in a game that you dominated. Why? You went to overtime in a game where Tampa's power play was horrible. 0 for 3, they had 2 shots. It had no creativity. It had no good scoring opportunities. And that's something Colorado did well as well, is penalty kill. They didn't allow Tampa to have time to set up. I applaud them for that. But Braden Point's going through the growing pains. He struggled in the first period and a half. I thought he didn't look great in the first period. I read an article. What are they going to do with Braden Point in Tampa? Should that be a concern? No. He got better as the game went on. If you watched the whole game, you went to bed, I get 9 o'clock, I get it's a late start. He played well. He started to find it. And they can make an adjustment in this series, which I think they will eventually, John Cooper will, is they can put Nick Paul at center and put Cirelli with Point on a line. Nick Paul can be on the shutdown line with Killorn and with Hagel. Cirelli can play with Point, and maybe they put Cirelli at center and Point can play the wing. Coming off an injury, when you have a flexibility like Tampa does, you can do that because Nick Paul can play center. He's a great guy on the faceoff dot. That's something I think we will see in this series. That's something I think we need to see in this series because it'll make a big difference. Point doesn't play well. Stamkos is invisible. Vasilevsky's mediocre. Hedman plays pretty crappy. Well, it sounds about a 5-1 win for Colorado, right? Because McKinnon was great. Nichushkin was great. Rantanen played great. Makar was all over the ice. Wait, 4-3 in overtime? Yeah, 4-3 in overtime. That was the game. Game 2, which we'll talk about again tomorrow. So I don't want to preview too much. So I want you guys to tune in. To give you a reason to tune in before tomorrow night's game. Listen to the podcast. But again, it's home ice tomorrow. It's so important for Colorado to win. It's so important for Colorado to win because they have all the pressure. Split going back to Tampa? Yikes. Even if Tampa's down 0-2, I won't panic, but it's more of a concern because you're playing a better team. But even then, I have faith in this team. Do I think they could win 4 in a row against Colorado? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. But Colorado did nothing in game 1 to have me convinced that I should be more confident, that I should be worried about my Tampa pick in 6, because they threw the kitchen sink at the Tampa Bay Lightning. And the Tampa Bay Lightning, Colorado had a Malibu mansion, beautiful home, Range Rover in the driveway, whatever else, Maserati sitting there. And Tampa had an old Ford Mustang that had no motor in it. And yet they're living side by side. So what the hell's happening here? What it tells me is both teams are rich, but the guy with all the fancy, expensive stuff in the 1 yard is overcompensating. Well, the guy with the old Ford Mustang that needs a new engine, well, if he gets all the parts and pieces, which Tampa has, that Ford Mustang is going to blow past that Maserati. That Ford Mustang, I don't even like Ford, so I don't even know why I'm using that example, but Mustang's a nice enough car. Let's go Camaro because I fuck Ford. But you got an old Camaro, 69 Camaro in the driveway. You got all the pieces that can make it work. Stamkos, Point, all these guys, they come together. That Camaro is going to go blow past that Maserati. And before you know it, the guy with all the expensive stuff in the driveway is going to have a bunch of dirt blowing up, going to have a bunch of just going to be basically global warming in his front yard because that Camaro is just going to be doing donuts, just spinning right in front of his house. And before you know it, it's not going to be worth as much as he thinks it is. Maybe that's a poor analogy. Hope you get it. Hope you can make the sense of it with me because Tampa's a rich team. So's Colorado. But Tampa looked poor in game one. Looked like they were, struggling to get alive. Can barely afford a six-pack. But when they got all things going, they can buy a 40. They can buy whatever the hell they want. And before you know it, they're drunk, drinking expensive liquor. Game 2 tomorrow. We'll talk about it more tomorrow when it comes to this series. Great game 1, though. Really fast hockey. Really entertaining hockey. So I thoroughly enjoyed game 1. I expect game 2 to be no different tomorrow night. Official today, John Tortorella is now the head coach of the Philadelphia Flyers. They give him a 4-year deal worth about $3.5 million. Which my biggest surprise with this is the number, which is 4 years. I thought he'd get 3. I thought they'd want him to get to a 2-year deal. But I'm sure Torts would say, no, you're giving me a 3. But to get a 4-year deal, it's interesting because I don't know where the Philadelphia management think they are. Where does Chuck Fletcher think Philly is? Because when I look at this team, they are not close to being a contender whatsoever. They're not close to being they're not that close to being a playoff team. Yes, they're getting JVR off the books, which helps. And yes, Martin Jones will be off the books. And yes, hopefully, but you look at it and say, I love Ryan Ellis. I've loved Ryan Ellis since he played at the World Juniors. But unfortunately, the guy can't stay healthy. It's terrible. I wish he could. He's a great player. But he can't stay healthy. Carter Hart might have been the next prodigy in net, but he's never looked like one in the NHL. Ever. I've never seen him play consistently good hockey since he got into the league. Period. So to think, well, Carter Hart's... Stop right there. To think Carter Hart, if any time your team is well, our goalie has to be... Cut it. Carter Hart has not shown it. I'd have very little faith in that. You need to build a team around him that can play. Defensively, this team was horrible last year. 28th in goals against. I like Sanheim on the back end. Provorov has his warts. If you could move him, I would. If you can get a good haul back. Because, yes, he's a good player. But also, he's been on your roster for a while, and your team hasn't been any good. So maybe you need to move somebody. You need to change things up. Giroux's gone. Voracek Couturier is still on the roster, but he has his injury problems. This team has more holes than I think management realizes. And I'm curious to see what the viewpoint is. Because Torts, when he joined Columbus, it was to build a culture. It was to make it a tough team to play against. And yes, I do think Philly has the perception that they're a soft team. Gerard Gallant was brought into New York to change that perception. And I think Torts will want to do that. Cam Atkinson vouched for him. He coached him in Columbus. But also, I wouldn't expect Philly to just turn it around next year. Torts is important for building a culture. Torts is important for making this team tough, not just, okay, you can go all over us. We're weak-minded. The bigger job here is Chuck Fletcher, the general manager, to build a team and to draft well and to make good decisions in this offseason when you're handing out contracts. Signing Johnny Gaudreau, which could happen because Gaudreau's from New Jersey, but Philly's always been linked, is not the solution. That doesn't make you just a champion right away. Would he help? Sure. But that's not he needs to make smart moves for this team to get better. Number one for me, work with Carter Hart. I'm not saying give up on the kid, but this prodigy, that's gone. That perception is dead, that this guy is the next coming of Martin Brodeur. I haven't seen it. He's never showed it. I don't want to hear it anymore. But could you work with him so at least he could be a competent starter in this league? That's something that I think Philly needs to work on in this offseason. Work with the goaltender. Work with their young guys. You made that trade for Giroux. Owen Tippett is now on the roster. Can he make your team next year out of camp? But this team is going to be, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. That's what I expect from the Philadelphia Flyers because I don't like their roster. I just don't. But I think Torts is a good hire when you're building a team around culture, when you're building a team to not be as weak. They need somebody like him. But I do think this Philly team needs to pump the brakes when it comes to expectations. Because Chuck Fletcher, look at your roster. It isn't that strong. It isn't that good. And that's what needs to be acknowledged here is, okay, on paper, you had some really good big-name players. But guys just haven't played that well for your organization. I like Joel Farabee. Travis Konechny is a guy I'd trade. Travis Konechny's got all the piss and vinegar in the world. And yes, he's annoying. He's like Gallagher. But he takes stupid penalties. He's not good enough of an irritant. And he's not scoring as many goals as he used to. If you can get rid of him, get off him. He's one of your core pieces. I think he's more of a detriment than he is a solution. And I like that style of player. But this offseason is imperative for Chuck Fletcher, but also moving forward to look at this team and really give Torts a chance. He gets 4 years. But to look and say, you know what, we're not that damn good. And sometimes that's hard to do when you're the GM and you built the crap team that you put on the ice. But that's the most important thing Chuck Fletcher can do is just say, you know what? I'm still employed, so I can make changes. I'm not getting fired. They could have fired me already. They haven't. He has the opportunity to make some gradual changes right now to this roster, to get off contracts he doesn't like, and to see what happens. That's how I'd approach it. Philly is not that close to being competitive. But they can do things to make their team better next season, and I think adding Torts as coach is just one of those things. Now, U.S. Open, we're currently in day 2 of the U.S. Open down in Brookline, Mass., where after day 1, Canadian Adam Hadwin was the outright leader, shooting 4 under 66, for the best round of the day. And there's a lot of different headlines. The number one for me after day 1 was just the leaderboard and how wacky it was. We saw a lot of names that you're not used to seeing at the majors being at the top of the leaderboard. A few, Taman and you had an amateur at 3 under at one point. He finishes at 3 over. Rory McIlroy is at the top, but seeing Adam Hadwin be up that high, Hayden Buckley, the American. Again, not a household name in the golf world, and obviously low scoring. But right now, as we sit here, we got Callum Tarrant, who is an Englishman. He's -5 leading the tournament. He's through 5 holes. He's 2 under for the round today, followed by Hayden Buckley, who's -3, Joel Dahman, Nick Hardy, Matthew Neesmith, and Rory McIlroy, and Scotty Scheffler, who shot 3 under today. So Scotty Scheffler's right in the mix, the world number 1, after he holed out for eagle on the 15th par 5 today. He on the 14th hole, the par 5. And this course is playing tough. It's playing extremely tough. Like I said, low scores, but Callum Tarrant, an Englishman, being this high at this point is strange. Joel Dahman being there. But I bet on Rory McIlroy. He looks possessed. He had a good round yesterday, shooting a 67. But for these guys this afternoon, Scotty Scheffler had a great round. Sam Burns is 2 under. He shot -3 today, which is the best score on the course today. Those two guys who played this morning in the same group. Adam Hadwin shot 2 over today, but he is 2 under. He's still in the mix. He's still in the fight, so to speak, in this tournament. For a guy like Rory McIlroy, if he could shoot 1 under, 2 under today, that would be an extremely good round, even shooting even par. Because of the way the course is playing, there's a lot of wind, and it played tougher in the day yesterday. The guys in the afternoon really had a tough go. I expect to see the same things today because you see some better scores in the morning. But I want to see what intrigued me was seeing how the LIV guys did compared to the regular, just the guys on the PGA Tour. Because you got Morikawa, you got Rahm in the mix. Koepka shot 3 under today, so he finishes even par. So he's likely going to make the cut. He'll still be in the mix in all likelihood. Thomas Peters shot 2 under. But if we look at our LIV guys, because starting today, we saw so today Bryson DeChambeau shot 1 over, so he finished he's +2. Dustin Johnson had a really good first day. He shot 2 under, and then it didn't go as well for him today. If I remember correctly, he was having a tough go, and I'm trying to find him on the leaderboard because I was tracking him before he shot 3 over today. He's now +1, will likely make the cut, but he had a tough go. Kevin Na, he's likely not going to make the cut. He's another LIV Tour guy. Sergio Garcia's +4, not going to make the cut. Jason Kokrak shot 5 over today. He's not going to make the cut. And again, this doesn't mean that these players aren't great, that they're not good guys. Like Kevin Na shot even today. He's +5. He's not making the cut. And there's obviously guys in the PGA Tour. Louis Oosthuizen is +6 for the tournament. Another LIV Tour guy, not going to make the cut. And I have no problem with the LIV Tour. I've mentioned that before, but I do find it intriguing to track because a lot of these guys aren't going to make the cut. DJ will, Bryson likely will because of how big the scores are. But to see Louis Oosthuizen, who's always in majors, to see guys like DeChambeau and them not be in the mix and to be full of PGA Tour players, I think that's exactly what the Tour wants. I think that's exactly what you're looking for, is for these LIV Tour guys to not even be in the mix, to miss the cut. And then the PGA Tour can say, hey, we got the best players in the world over here. The guys who defected, they aren't that good anyway because we're killing them here. We're destroying them. And it's a good argument, seeing these guys struggle. It's a tough golf course, but to track the LIV versus PGA side of it is also very intriguing. But I'm curious to see this afternoon how Rory plays. I have Xander Schauffele in my pool. I have Jon Rahm, the defending champion. How these guys do, and if they can make it interesting come this weekend. If we get to moving day tomorrow, which is Saturday, if we have a lot of big names at the top of the leaderboard, because guys are on the first or second hole today, so still have a long way to go, still have a lot of tough holes to get through just to make the cut and be competitive. But what I hope to see after today, after a Friday, is we see a lot of the aforementioned names in the same group tomorrow, make it super interesting. And, what's great too is if there's a low score, say it's the leader's -3 at the end of today, and Callum Tarrant is -5 right now, but that can change in a second with a bad shot. You miss a fairway, you put in that thick rough, which is if you do get to watch the U.S. Open this weekend on TV, you can see what they do at U.S. Opens. They don't cut the rough. It's impossible to get through it, and you have to be extremely strong to get out of it because it's nearly impossible to have success when you put it in the rough. If you go driver and you put it in the rough, you are in trouble on this golf course. But I'm curious to see if there's big names on the board, and if the leader's at 3 under and you have a guy like Brooks Koepka who's even par heading into tomorrow, he's still in good shape to compete for the title. That's what I like about the U.S. Open is guys who are 3 strokes away, guys who are far, can still have an impact because those leaders could have a tough round. They could start missing fairways, and before you know it, they're dropping strokes, and these guys who are even par are right back in the mix. So I'm just watching the scoreboard today, watching guys and see how they do, and seeing. And I think this tournament is about Rory McIlroy. He hasn't won a major in 8 years. But after winning the Canadian Open last week, after being so boisterous against the LIV Tour, I think he's found a new passion. I think he wants this desperately. And seeing him, in this mode, I want to see if he can close. I want to see if he can get back onto the major, get another major under his belt, and really, really show himself again to the golf world that he is one of the best in the world, and that he's sending a message to the LIV guys. He's sending a message that, hey, I'm still on the PGA Tour. I'm the best player in the world, and I don't care how much money you guys are making over there, because you're looking at the best. But Justin Thomas shot is 1 over for the tournament. He didn't have a great day. Didn't have a great morning today. So he's still playing. He's still in the mix right now. But just curious to see the cut line, see what guys make it in, and different storylines like that. But so far, a good tournament. That's my plan this weekend. Because the weather doesn't look great. So I plan on watching a lot of golf. Obviously, I'm going to watch Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final podcast tomorrow morning, but I plan on binging Ozark. I haven't finished Ozark yet. I think I've watched 2 episodes of the second part of the second half of the last season, and I think I might just restart it because I kind of forget what happens. I want to just start it fresh, going to get through the whole thing, and I might recap Ozark on Monday. If it's such an interesting ending, I want to talk about it. So I do. That's something. If you haven't seen the show, let me know. But I do want to talk about Ozark because I find that interesting. And I'm also going to binge watch this weekend season 3 of Barry, with the rain, that's just what I do. Binge watch Barry, binge watch Ozark this weekend, and sprinkle in some sports. Throw in golf on the TV while I'm doing both. That sounds like a pretty crappy weekend and not real fun, but that's my plan right now, is binge watch those 2 shows and then get golf on as well. So that's my plans, but I do want to get to Ozark because I've heard from many people that's an interesting ending. I don't know if you'll like it, which is cryptic because I really don't know what that means. I don't know. I don't think you'll like it. Again, I watch a lot of shows. I'm very tough on shows. I'm critical. So, but sometimes people hated The Sopranos ending. I think that was a great ending. It's one of the great endings in the history of television. So we'll see. But that's my plans this weekend, is to binge watch those 2 shows. And I'll let you know what I think about them come Monday. Now, before we wrap today, let's get to some CFL. I didn't talk about this last week, but the Canadian Football League is back. And I love the CFL. There's not many games I miss. I got into the sport because of my grandfather, and I rarely miss a game. I watched the game between the Als and Argos last night in the Argos home opener, and I think there's a lot of intriguing parts of this CFL this season, starting with the Argonauts. Argonauts made a lot of changes after last season. They brought in Brandon Banks from Hamilton, who had always been a Hamilton Tiger Cat, had been an enemy of the Argos, but he left Hamilton in the offseason after they had some differences. He joins the Argos. They also made a huge splash in signing Andrew Harris in free agency after Winnipeg said after winning 2 Grey Cups that he's an older back. He's 35, and they thought they could move on without him and still be competitive. So Andrew Harris joins the Argos with a chip on his back. I think Brandon Banks, the same thing, where Hamilton just didn't view him the same way as he used to be when it comes to speed and his production on the field. But both had good starts to their seasons last night. Andrew Harris had 18 carries for 85 yards. And what I liked most about what Harris did last night, in particular the Argos, is their quarterback, McLeod Bethel Thompson, was not asked to do to be everything. They ran a ton of plays early in the ballgame. They started off the game with 12 run plays to 3 pass plays. I love seeing that from the Argonauts, especially with Andrew Harris. He had to leave the game with hamstring tightness, but he had a good game. I like seeing the short intermediate passing game. But that was a positive sign for me. The Alouettes lose the game on a last-second missed field goal, which it was the biggest gimme I've ever seen, and David Cote just missed it It was a chip shot. I can't believe he did. Inexcusable missed field goal. I hate field goal kickers. I'd hate them even more if I was an Alouette or the coaching staff. Kahari Jones looked like he was going to faint after he saw that field goal left. But the Alouettes, again, they're in this weird pattern where Vernon Adams Jr. was hurt last night. He always seems to get hurt. I do think he's a good quarterback, but he's constantly injured. William Stanback, the leading rusher in the CFL last year, is on the 6-game injured list, so he's out. They got a good receiver in Eugene Lewis, and they got a decent team, but they just lose close games. They lost a close game to Calgary in week 1. They lose a close game last night. They don't have that gene to win tight games. And for the Alouettes, this is a big season. They brought in Anthony Calvillo to be the quarterback's coach, and Trevor Harris came off the bench and played well. They should have won the game last night, but they didn't. And now they're 0-2 already to start the season. And it's not panic time in Montreal, but I think there's worry because the Argonauts are a good team. I think the Ottawa Red Blacks have improved. They brought in Jeremiah Mazzoli. They lost week 1, but they played the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They play them again tonight in a rematch. So I'm curious to see what they bring to the table if they can play better. If Mazzoli could have had a better second half, I think they win that game because Colaros and Winnipeg didn't get a lot going on offense. So I'm curious to see what the Red Blacks have in store for them tonight. But, they're better. I think the Argonauts are better. The East is not as weak as it used to be, for sure. Hamilton is still a good team. They got blown out in week 1, for sure. But Dane Evans is a good quarterback. I think Hamilton will rebound. They've been a consistently good team for a long time now. But to me, the two scariest teams are Winnipeg, and I still view Calgary because I think Bo Levi Mitchell had a tough year last year. He's gone through some injury problems. He's had some interception issues. He had the most interception in his career last year. And Jake Meyer is a good quarterback behind him. But I like what Calgary has done. They've reshaped this team. They got a very good offensive line in front of Bo Levi. And I expect this team to be competitive. I expect this team to duke it out in the West. But, it's interesting because then Calgary's very good. I think Winnipeg and then BC's kind of the team you don't know about because they got Nathan Rourke at quarterback, who's a young Canadian QB. He's still trying to prove himself as an everyday starter after the retirement of Mike Riley. And they dominate week 1. But again, it's always, every week is an opportunity to prove something. And that's really what the CFL is for, Saskatchewan's been great been consistent the last number of years, but Cody Fajardo and that team couldn't get over the hill. BC's, can they rise back and be a competitive team? Can Montreal start to win some of these games? I think the league is extremely close. Winnipeg's a good team. I don't think they're elite. They lost a lot of players. They've won 2 Grey Cups in a row. Through that, you lose players just like every other sport. Tampa's won 2 Stanley Cups in a row. You lose pieces that helped you win that prize. So I look around and I just say, well, any team could win. I like Saskatchewan's roster a lot, but Cody Fajardo has his limitations at quarterback. So is he good enough to win a Grey Cup? I have my doubts. Calgary, I like them, but Bo Levi's constantly injured, and the receiving core could be better. So I doubt that. Hamilton's played a lot of football. Their team's been together forever. But Ted Laurent, Simone Lawrence, Jagger Davis, they have an older team. Can that defense hold up, which is really the backbone of their team? And with no Mazzoli behind Dane Evans, is he good enough to be a starting quarterback in the CFL? So this season should be, I think it should be extremely fun season. It should be interesting because there's no definitive great team. There's no definitive front runner because the league is very, very close. So that's a good sign for the league to have some competitive games and to have a productive season and hopefully a profitable one following the 2-year nightmare COVID situation for one of Canada's best sports and one of best leagues in all of Canada. So with that being said, we got some baseball tonight. We'll talk about that tomorrow because we got some interesting series. We got the Jays tonight. They're playing the Yankees. Ross Stripling will pitch tonight against against Jordan Montgomery. Sorry, we'll talk about that tomorrow on the podcast. We'll talk about, obviously, preview Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final. I think we got Astros White Sox was an interesting series. We'll talk about the pick of the day, which is Guardians over the Dodgers, and Plesac going over let's go 5 2/3 innings. And just because you fade Seamus's teams, that's the way you make money. You fade who Seamus is rooting for. You find some success. So that's pick of the day. Guardians over Dodgers. 11 o'clock start. If you want to stay up for it, watch some Guardians play the Dodgers tonight at Chavez Ravine. But hope you guys enjoyed the show today. Have a great weekend. But stay awake for tomorrow because it's a Saturday, but we'll be back. And we'll chat then. On to the point.